You have asked me to describe the idea of condensation of consciousness, consolidation of consciousness. Okay? You have asked me to explain the idea of the concentration or the consolidation of consciousness, which you have heard in some of my discourses, isn't it? Okay. Now, my Thakur often draws upon the metaphor of water, finding it a more fitting medium to explain the soul or the Shukkha Sharir, what you call the subtle body. For the sake of technical precision across both ontological and epistemological dimensions, I will use the term Shukkha Sharir or subtle body rather than the word soul. Okay? Understood? You might argue that our gross and subtle bodies are composed of the 5 primordial elements, which we call Khiti, Op, Tej, Murud, Bam. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the Bam or the Mahashurna. Why then, setting the other 4 aside, it is more advantageous to discuss the subtle body through the lens of water alone? Why, you may ask? The reason is that among these 5 elements, Khiti of Tej Murud Bam, the up or the water is the only one we can perceive with our ordinary senses in all the 3 states, solid, liquid and vapor. It is within these 3 states of water that a profound relationship with both the gross and subtle bodies is intricately woven. Understood? Before that, I have to remind you that the process of consolidation of consciousness at its primary stage denotes absolute dominion over your will force across all states of your being, irrespective of whether you are alive or you are dead. There are, of course, far more intricate and profound dimensions to this idea of crystallization of consciousness, but at this moment you wouldn't be able to grasp them. Okay? So, to keep our discussion simple, I shall confine myself to the nuances of mastering one's will force. Now, the tradition that is followed here in this context, which my Thakur also follows, draws from the imagery of butter being extracted from milk, only to float gracefully upon its source. We have seen it. Butter is extracted from milk, and the same butter floats on the surface of the same milk from which it has been extracted, isn't it? Similarly, you are meant to solidify your own consciousness within the boundless ocean of the cosmic awareness, abiding there by the strength of your will force. This is the ultimate purpose of your birth, and the reason you have been gifted this Sthula Sharir or this physical form. Understood? This Sthula Sharir or material body is nothing but a magnificent instrument. You can call it a beautiful vehicle meant to crystallize that consciousness. Indeed, your birth serves no other purpose. Your Sthula Sharir or physical form was granted for this reason and for this reason alone. Okay? No other purpose of this Sthula Sharir. Understood? Now, at its core, milk is a complex emulsion. It is, you can consider it as a delicate suspension of water, milk solids, proteins, solid tiny fat crystals, and microscopic oil droplets. Okay? To transform milk into butter, the process begins by sealing the liquid inside a container and churning or whipping it vigorously. As the milk slams against the walls of the vessel, the container, air is forced into the liquid, creating a network of tiny air cells inside the milk. Understood? Now, intrigued by this new landscape, the oil droplets and milk solids migrate toward the surfaces of these newly formed bubbles. This is how butter is formed, Now, as the churning continues, these air bubbles expand until they can no longer hold their structure. When they inevitably collapse, they force the trapped oil droplets and milk solids into direct contact. The liquid oil that once coated the surface of the bubbles now acts as a natural adhesive, binding the solids into larger clusters. A phenomenon which is known as probably partial coalescence in chemistry. Now, with sustained stirring, these microscopic clusters collide and crash into one another, eventually fusing into a singular cohesive network of milk fat and solids. Now, what you get, that means what remains is a beautiful transformation, the rich, spreadable reward, you call it butter. Okay? If you conceive milk as your raw consciousness and butter as that same consciousness that has been consolidated, the essence of my narrative you can clearly understand. All the milk solids, oil droplets, and microscopic particulates represent all the lingering baggage of your past that your consciousness is currently carrying. Okay? Imagined? Understood? Now, transforming this milk into butter demands immense unyielding effort. It requires constant churning, but more importantly, it requires an external agent or a catalyst. Left entirely to its own, milk will never spontaneously become butter. It demands your sincere, painstaking labor alongside an external force to drive the churning process. This ultimate state of butter is what is traditionally called mukti or moksha in the spiritual vocabulary, which is known as the ultimate salvation or liberation. For countless millennia, you can say, this is precisely how the evolution of consciousness has been understood. The path to mukti bestowed by my Thakur also aligns beautifully with this timeless tradition, a model that is revered across the universe since time immemorial. I, however, hold a slightly different perspective on this mystery. Instead of focusing on the milk solids, fats, and proteins that are there in the milk, I begin by concentrating on the water inherently held within the milk. Rather than examining how butter is churned from liquid milk, I look at how ice forms upon water. Visually and philosophically, the two concepts are identical: a solid, unified expression of a substance rising to float gracefully upon its own liquid source, isn't it? Ice floats on the water, which is its source. Butter floats on the milk being the butter's source, the source of the butter. Now, let's consider the process of ice forming on water. Let's see how it happens. You have seen that ice floats on water, haven't you? We all know. We all have seen. Usually, when something is cooled, it shrinks. I mean to say, its volume decreases and so it becomes more dense. That's the reason the solid version of a substance generally doesn't float on the liquid version of the same substance. Of course, there are a few exceptions, like say silicon or germanium or say bismuth, like this. In the case of silicon, we find that its density as solid is 2.3 gram per cubic centimeter, while liquid silicon has a density of roughly 2.6 gram per cubic centimeter. Lesser its density in the solid state, it can float on its liquid form. Likewise, solid germanium and solid bismuth can also float on their respective liquid forms. Understood? But the melting points of these elements being very high, these phenomena we don't see in nature under normal circumstances. The only exception we come across is water. So, water is so important. And this phenomenon of ice floating upon water is also absolutely critical for life to exist at all. Now let's see why this happens in the case of water. If we take a closer look at the molecule of water, we see that it is made out of two hydrogen and an oxygen atom. The answer to the question of why ice floats on water lies in the shape of the water molecule. Understood? Two hydrogens, one oxygen, H2O. We call it water. The shape of the water molecule isn't linear but angular. It is roughly bent at an angle of 104.5 degree with oxygen in the middle and two hydrogen atoms on either side. The electron sharing takes place between the oxygen atom and the two hydrogen atoms, and these are known as covalent bonds. The oxygen atom has 8 protons and 8 electrons, while the hydrogen atom has 1 proton and 1 electron. Due to the stronger pull of the larger number of protons in the oxygen atom, the electrons of the two covalent bonds in the water molecule get closer to the oxygen atom, giving the oxygen atom a slightly greater negative charge. As a result of which, the hydrogen atoms are endowed with a slightly more positive charge. Understood? Like this, it is bent 104.5 degrees or something like that. Oxygen at the center and two bonds. A molecule which has one side of it a positive charge and negative charge on the other end is called a polar molecule. So water is a polar molecule. So most of the things dissolve in water, no? Due to the polarity ingredient of water. This uneven charge distribution in the water molecule means that in the normal temperature, the water molecules interact with each other, and these weak interactions between the positive charge of one water molecule and the negative charge of a neighboring water molecule is what we call a hydrogen bond. But above the temperature of 4 degrees Celsius, the hydrogen bonds between different water molecules are quickly broken due to the higher kinetic energy of the water molecules. during this period, the hydrogen bonds can't hold the water molecules together. Now, as the water temperature starts dropping below 4 degrees Celsius, the water molecules start losing their kinetic energy and start slowing down, allowing the water molecules to gradually bind each other together. This starts forming a new molecular structure by the hydrogen bonds. The shape of the water molecule is angular, Now, so large empty spaces are created in the molecular structure, which increases the volume of the ice, making it less dense than liquid water. And this is the reason for which ice floats on water. Understood? If ice didn't behave this way, the marine life wouldn't have survived during winter. Water at around 3 degrees Celsius is the most dense, and so it drops down to the bottom and it stays there. Further cooling of the surface water, ultimately bringing it down to zero, creates ice which floats on the top of the liquid water surface, and at the same time beneath it lies the more dense water at 3 degrees Celsius. This water remains at the bottom, and by this means all aquatic life survive during winter. This example alone, suffices to reveal the profound vigilance and sensitivity of Mother Nature and the sheer magnitude of her tender grace. In the freezing of water into ice, these empty spaces or voids mark the essential imprint of what I call Shunno. By mastering this Shunno or void, I am working to facilitate a seamless consolidation of the consciousness very easily and without much hassle. The empty space when ice is formed, the empty space created is what I call the Shunno. And it is Shunno which facilitates the ice to form on the surface of water. If you view consciousness as milk, churning butter from it is a grueling, time-consuming ordeal. A task that may span even countless lifetimes. However, if we perceive that very same consciousness as water, transforming it into ice becomes an entirely spontaneous and effortless process. Isn't it? Left all by itself, milk will never naturally transmute into butter. Water, on the other hand, requires no effort at all. It can spontaneously freeze into ice simply if the surrounding temperature drops. In nature, milk never turns to butter on its own, but water effortlessly solidifies into ice, left all by itself. You only need to know how to manipulate the void. Understood? When I first shared this realization with my Thakur, he embraced me warmly and he wept. Then, following his instruction, I cast this thought of mine into the vast emptiness of the great cosmos, the universe. This is the universal law, Generally, after casting my thought into the vastness of the Mahashunya, generally if a challenge is to arise, it manifests within 72 hours. To this day, I have remained absolutely unchallenged. So, I can say that this model of mine has been accepted. Isn't it? Okay.